This is Sarah Jones with Politicus Radio. Joining me tonight is Politicus USA Editor-in-Chief Jason Easley to discuss the changing tide against Republicans due to their refusal to fund the Department of Homeland Security. Thanks for joining me, Jason.
Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. So, this is going to be interesting today. We saw a press conference with Speaker Boehner today that was rather shocking because during it, we saw the press really push back against him for his earlier promise to fund Homeland Security versus his current refusal to budge from the poison pill position of the House. For the last 6 years, Republicans have had the press as their backup, rarely pushed back on. I would say even having their talking points water carried for them by the press at times, especially during the fake scandals of Benghazi and the IRS. Given that the GOP's first 6 weeks of control of Congress have given us only one law, but tons of humiliation and defeat for Republicans, do you think the tide is shifting against Republicans now that they're in charge?
Now that they're in charge is the important thing, because now even the media demands accountability. The media model is really simplistic when it comes to covering Congress. They never see the nuance of what's happened. What they do is whoever's in charge must be responsible. Remember when Democrats would get blamed for Republican obstruction, and why can't you just work with Republicans when the Democrats control the Senate? Well, the shoe's on the other foot now. Except in this case, the media has been really smart, and I think part of this is because Homeland Security, the D.C. media, Homeland Security employs a lot of people in D.C., and these are real jobs. Right. For these people. So they want to know, why can't you just do the simple thing that you said you were going to do, which is fund Homeland Security? If Democrats don't like the unrelated immigration language, why can't you take it out?
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point, because that's exactly what they were saying to Democrats forever. Why can't you just go along with this crazy whatever that Republicans put in the bill? And that would drive Democrats crazy, because it seemed like, why are you saying to split it down the middle when it's between crazy and moderate and not crazy and liberal? So it's not one extreme to the other. But, this is really interesting because Scott Walker... I'm going to veer off just for a second because I think this is a broader issue. Scott Walker was in London and he was asked about evolution today, and he said he, basically tried to dodge the question. Later, his campaign came out and admitted that he doesn't believe in evolution.
I don't know if I'd say admit it. I'd say that when they clarified, they want all Republican voters to know that Scott Walker does not believe in evolution.
I was gonna say that it's not an admission when it comes to Republicans.
It's sort of a badge of pride.
Your bona fides. Exactly. This is sort of like, we're a real Republican.
Science.
We don't believe in science or facts. But it was interesting because now I'm seeing a lot of the conservative media complaining about how Republicans are treated differently overseas. And I think really that the truth is that the press overseas has not been guilt-tripped into and bullied into accepting reality denial as a legitimate response.
I think the press overseas has not seen anything like this Republican Party, where facts are contestable.
Right. I mean, they were shocked. They were shocked.
They're optional.
Yeah.
And so they expect everybody to still. It's kind of a quaint attitude that we used to have here until about 10 years ago, that the facts should be agreed upon.
Right.
Remember, Republicans started to sort of lose their grasp on factiness whenever George W. Bush was selling the Iraq War, and even though all the evidence was saying there were no weapons of mass destruction, Republicans kept pushing and pushing and pushing, getting further and further and further away from reality through the selling of the war, through the war itself. That's sort of, to me, the grandfathering of the Republican detachment from reality, and that just went into hyperdrive when Obama won the election.
And maybe we haven't really seen, because we haven't had a Republican in the White House during the time when digital media and social media were made up such a large portion of how people get their news, because you saw this happen to Mitt Romney during the election, but it hasn't happened to any other Republicans really. And I think maybe the Republicans in Congress are so used to getting away with saying crazy things and having the press nod and take dictation, basically, that they're a little surprised right now.
Well, as somebody who was writing during the George W. Bush administration, I
And
can
monitored for it.
I
Nice
can
job.
I can tell you that what's different is the technology. It's everything is so instantaneous now. Back whenever Bush was in office for most of his time, the deal was, especially early in the Bush years, you would write an article, people would email it to each other, or even still print it out and hand it to each other. There was no Twitter, there was no Facebook, there was no YouTube, so that there was video of what happened. There was just actually video started coming into vogue when Bush was in office, and that's how some of the older liberal websites made their name, was through embeddable video clips that people put on their blogs.
But as you're saying, the information wasn't shareable immediately,
Yeah.
and so it wasn't pushed back on the way it is now. So
Yeah.
I just think that that's a big, something that's going to be interesting. We see it in the presidential elections. We haven't seen it yet on the congressional level, but maybe it's because they haven't been in charge. So that's kind of where I was going with that. That now that they are in charge and they control both chambers.
I think Democrats are trying, but with 435 members of the House and 100 members of the Senate voting members, it's harder to monitor 535 people as opposed to one person in the White House and get that message back out there, and it's harder to target who to send that message to. So it's a lot. It takes more resources and more people. I think everybody is so in tune with social media, and this is where we've seen Jeb Bush really stumble. He's like a dinosaur right now. He doesn't really get any of this. That everything is so fast now. So you can't hire a guy, on our last show, you can't hire a guy that hates women and gay people.
Oh, that's most of the
And he puts it on
Republican
Twitter, and not expect there to be a media blowback.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though, is I think they were so excited about their attacks against Obama, the Benghazi, their fake scandals that they ginned up, getting traction at the time. And yet, when you look back at that, you realize that there was no other news going on. And also, this is the age of this kind of media, of this fire that catches now. But
the question is, on the Benghazi and all the things they quote unquote got traction on, they didn't really get traction in the broader populace. They got traction within the political media, the people that follow politics. I mean, they wanted this to be like a big Watergate kind of story.
Well, it didn't get that traction because it wasn't true.
It never happened.
It has to be true at some point. But they did manage to damage the administration and damage the policies that they were pushing at that time with these scandals. So I think they were successful, as largely successful as you can be when you're pushing a fake story. Because eventually it's going to get busted. But, they never even got in trouble for that. But I want to move on because I want to get to this what's going on right now with Republicans due to the Homeland Security issue. Because basically Republicans have been in charge for 6 weeks now, and we've seen in this lead up to the shutting down of the Department of Homeland Security, which will be shutting down on the 27th of this month of February if it isn't funded, something that Republicans swore they wouldn't let happen. They said that during the election, and they've said it plenty times after that. And this is leading to this sort of massive Republican meltdown. And it looks like Republicans aren't, we thought for a while they were just going to wait till the last minute to pass the DHS bill. But it looks like they're not going to possibly pass a clean funding bill at all. They may shut down Homeland Security. Even as we have spate of global terrorism sweeping the news right now. The Republicans in the House, they passed a $39.7 billion Department of Homeland Security spending bill, but they loaded it down with riders that kill President Obama's executive actions on immigration. So that has no chance of the Dems voting on it in the Senate. And McConnell is still telling conservatives, we only have 54 seats. There are limits to what I can do. And meanwhile, Speaker Boehner saying the House, we did our job. We're not doing anything else. And he won't take a look at why aren't you taking the language out of the bill? And McConnell can't pass that in the Senate. So Republicans are arguing that what Democrats are doing to their Department of Homeland Security bill is obstruction. Is this the same as what Republicans did to Democrats or not?
This is actually the same fight. This is actually the same inter-congressional fight. Mitch McConnell is literally now standing in Harry Reid's shoes. This is what Harry Reid had to deal with every single time the House Republicans manufactured a crisis. And McConnell is just going, they're not going to vote for it. I can't pass it. Send me something I can pass. With the implication being the something he can pass is a clean funding bill. Because remember, Republicans have been trying to get rid of those Senate Republicans have been trying to get rid of that immigration language from day one.
But is it the same kind of obstruction as Democrats did?
It's not obstruction. Actually, I wrote about this. This is not obstruction at all because the difference is...
Well, Republicans are claiming that it is.
Yes,
so I want you to say whether it is or not.
They're claiming that it is, and...
It's a filibuster.
It's one of those usual Republican terms that on the surface, the parallel kind of fits, but when you look below it, it doesn't. Mm-hmm. Because the difference is Republicans would filibuster things they supported for the express purpose of making sure legislation did not pass. Denying Obama a win, they would call it, or denying the Democrats a win, because their whole goal was to take back the Senate. So their whole goal was nothing moved, nothing passed. Even things we support will not pass. Democrats are opposed to this bill for policy reasons. They will not support the language that overturns Obama's immigration actions. It's not the same. It's not obstruction to obstruct. This is a legitimate policy disagreement.
And I think it's even bigger than policy. It's political because Republicans are trying to basically take away the power of the presidency. And this is something that many presidents have done before with immigration, taken executive action on immigration policies. And suddenly Republicans have a problem with it. And they're trying to do anything, including holding the Department of Homeland Security hostage in order to control President Obama and take away the power that he has.
Yeah, this is also part of the age-old fight between the legislative and executive branches. And since they're split by party, the legislative branch desperately wants to limit the power of the executive branch. And you see that with the Keystone XL bill. The Keystone XL bill is a direct attack on executive power. So, I mean, there's a lot of that going on right now beneath the surface. But, fundamentally, this is the same mess that Republicans promised would not happen if they had total control of Congress.
Mm-hmm. And they haven't gotten anything. I mean, there's one law that they passed. So, okay, now conservatives in the House are calling for Senator McConnell to change the filibuster rules, which are the same rules that liberals wanted Harry Reid to change. And everyone tried to remind, it was very frustrating because due to the deliberate policy of obstruction, the strategy of obstruction that Republicans were doing, Harry Reid, the Democrats couldn't get a lot done. But had they changed those filibuster rules, now we would have Republicans rolling over kind of all sanity. So,
well, remember, the filibuster rules reset at the end of it with every new Congress. So each time the rule has to be changed when a new Congress comes in session. They don't roll over, so Reid's rules weren't going to be McConnell's rules.
I'm sorry, I totally misunderstood that. I thought that if you change the filibuster rules, in my understanding, if you change the filibuster rules the way that liberals were talking about wanting Reid to do, those rules, then it would be easy for McConnell to adopt that new rule.
Yeah, he would, but he would have to go through the process again and adopt the rule.
But he would have justification for that, wouldn't he?
That's what Republicans are trying to argue now, that they have justification based on what Harry Reid did in the last section.
But he didn't
regarding
change.
Nominations.
Well, okay, he changed it regarding nominations, but not regarding legislation.
Yeah, the funny thing is, and I don't know if we really had the chance to quote that in my story, that Senate Republicans don't want the rules changed. For the same reason that Harry Reid and the Democrats didn't want to go to a straight 51 votes for everything. Because once you open that door, And then when the Democrats come back in for the exact same reason that you just said, they can just say, well, the old rule was 51 votes for everything.
Right, exactly.
Everybody's cognizant that the fact that today's majority could be tomorrow's minority.
And 2016 does not look good for Republicans
Yeah,
in the Senate. So why would they change these rules? I don't see that happening.
I suspect that's why House Republicans are freaking out so much, because Harry Reid knew he had like 40 years to play with the majority no matter what. Republicans are looking at possibly only having a 2-year majority in the Senate. So they see what's going on here, and they're like, oh my God, we're not going to get anything passed with our majority. It's going to be useless.
If McConnell keeps this up, who knows how long he's going to have. I mean, so today he put up the vote for the third time on the same bill.
I mean, the fourth, this will be number 4.
I think it's the third. Well, it does. It's a lot. It's a lot. And so even John McCain said, "Isn't this the definition of insanity? Voting on the same bill over and over again."
Yeah. I mean, and he's only doing this. He's only doing this to appease the House. He's doing this for the same reason. Sometimes, remember when Harry Reid would allow votes on Republican bills that weren't going to pass, just to show Boehner this is never going to pass.
And didn't he say that he was going to open up all these amendments?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean,
open up debate for them.
Well, see, they can't even have debate right now because Democrats won't even allow it to go forward to get to the debate stage. They're not gonna let this thing take one step forward.
I mean, this is oh God.
So
we're sort of careening once again, right, towards this unfunded, Department of Homeland Security, and the objection to this is, and I will say this, I don't think this is regular politics because you're seeing bipartisan objection to what they're doing. The Department of Homeland Security came out and they said they want the president to veto this if indeed it did get passed, because they don't want this department to be used as a political, I think they called it a volleyball, but
again it's the precedent.
Exactly.
If you let House Republicans do this once, they're going to do it again with everything.
Well, they're already doing it with everything, aren't they? I mean, they're so proud of themselves because they didn't shut the whole government down. But now here we are. And one of their main issues is the border. And of course, the border, they can't patrol the southern border the same way without a funded Department of Homeland Security. And the border folks keep telling them that, but they're just, they're off in their crazy land. And this is, well, they can't. The problem is Boehner isn't backing down right now. And until Boehner backs down, this is what's happening.
Yes, for some bizarre reason, which I suspect is that he's back into believing his delusion that he can blame Democrats and the American people will buy it.
Yeah, he keeps trying that.
He doesn't seem to get the fact that this isn't going nowhere. And I know he might get
going nowhere.
He might get it himself. Yeah. But I know he's afraid of his whole Republican caucus just going insane if he says, okay, we're going to pass a clean funding bill on the Homeland Security. The thing we got to remind people is, if Homeland Security shuts down, these people aren't going to be all thrown out of work. They're going to have to work and not get paid.
Right, and some people, well, there are, I wish I had the statistics in front of me. I thought it was like there's 30,000 jobs that will stop getting paid or not. They won't come to work at all, but the rest of the folks won't be getting paid.
Yeah,
so I mean, whatever way you look at it, though, and I think you're right that's one reason why the DC press is pushing back on that.
It's really devastating because imagine having to still commute and go to work and have all your expenses.
Yeah, pay for your gas.
But get no paycheck.
Yeah. Well, it's outrageous. I mean, it's crazy.
And you can't when somebody's living paycheck to paycheck or even month to month, you can't backdate pay, and that makes it all okay.
Well, here exactly, and your mortgage is late. Yeah. You get behind payments.
Your car payment, your mortgage, all that stuff. Your
credit card bills. Well, okay, so I wanted to read you a quote from a Republican in the House. This is what McConnell is up against, basically, and I should say Boehner, because I think that he often tries to, he isn't this time, but he tries to wrangle the crazies in the Republican caucus to no avail. But so here's a quote. "I didn't set high expectations. It was Mitch McConnell and every other candidate who said, quote, 'We were going to stop the amnesty. We were going to stop Obamacare. We were going to take on this president.'" So that's what they're saying when they're confronted with the fact that this isn't passing the Senate. That's what they're left with. There's no one. They're not backing down. How do they dig themselves into this hole, and how are they going to reconcile this? I mean, how are they going to get something passed?
Well, they're going to get something passed because Boehner in the 11th hour will do what Boehner does. He'll look at Nancy Pelosi and say, please, please, please,
Please
give me
help
the
me, Miss
votes.
Nancy.
Give me the votes to get the DHS bill passed because enough of my Republicans aren't going to vote for it. And that'll happen in like the 11th hour, maybe 11 hour, 59 seconds, like right on the 27th. Maybe it'll shut down for a day or two just so House Republicans can proclaim victory. They've jeopardized national security.
Jeez.
That's
That's going on my resume.
that
I brought down national security.
they're gonna get something passed. Like eventually, the point is like they better hope to God that nothing happens while they're screwing around with the nation's security.
And you're already seeing the polls coming out, and they're getting blamed for this, and it's not going well for them.
It's like this. They're surprised they're getting blamed for this whenever the American people have seen them do this at least a half a dozen times in the past. People aren't stupid. They see this happening and they know automatically who to blame. There's no blame game. There's no back and forth. They know who's behind it. And so they go, oh, that's Boehner and his Republicans again. And then McConnell's Senate Republicans have to take the fall because guess what? They're all part of the same batch.
Oh, here's the quote that I wanted to share with you. Okay, so the Republicans keep making the argument that these folks will show up from even if it's not funded because they work for free. But here I have...
The Republican dream.
Yeah, the Republican dream, exactly. Oh, you worker bees, you work for free. There are 30,000 people who would be sent home, and they perform critical tasks that won't be done during a shutdown, from reviewing international shipments to conducting auctions of seized property. He said the agency and private companies would lose money in any shutdown, along with the border, a shutdown that would be put on hold, several proposed contracts that are monitoring the nearly 2,000-mile border. The border Republicans ran on, by the way. Just a little reminder. How you ruin your own agenda. This is how you ruin your own agenda.
Oh, they blew it up within a week of showing up. It wasn't even a week. It was the first 3 days.
Yeah,
it's chaos.
It's been. I think I put in one of my articles. It's like the SS Titanic because they've gone from, trying to overthrow Boehner to then this rape victim shouldn't have the right to have an abortion. That was brought down by their own female members. and then they scuttled their own border bill, and now this.
And Jeb Bush thinks this pile of quicksand is not going to drag him down. This is the party
As
he
if
has
his
to run
name
on.
isn't going to drag him down.
But I mean, all these guys, Christie, Walker, Bush, they all think that none of this is going to drag them down. Mitt Romney thought this wasn't going to drag him down in 2012.
See, that's why I keep coming back. I mean, it really is sort of becoming a mental... I don't want to call it a disease, but it's an issue because if you live in this kind of delusion, it's hard to understand how...
It's some sort of mentally ill collective group thing.
It is. No, it is collective mental illness. It's a denial of reality, basically. They're all in denial, like they're drug addicts, only they're sort of talking point ideology.
They're sort of Fox News addicts.
They're Fox News addicts. There you go. So I want to know the the holding of
There's
national...
that cough again.
I know, isn't that fun? Excuse me, everyone. It's been a really good time. But vaccines, don't bother with that business. As I'm here to show you. I'm here as a witness to the fact that when other people don't believe in vaccines, certain things come back and get those of us who even have been vaccinated against them. So that's a good bit of craziness there. So Republicans, they're holding national security funding hostage, basically. This is not... I think it's important to acknowledge this isn't normal politics, and we have the bipartisan group of former secretaries of the Department of Homeland Security, from Republicans Tom Ridge, Democrat Janet Napolitano. Yes, thank you. I can never say her name. I admit I am horrible at saying her name. They have all joined together to warn against this action. So. And urge the president to veto any bill that comes from the Republicans. So what do you think that has driven Republicans to this? They thought they could... I don't know why they thought this, because every time they try this, Democrats say no, and they've made a point of saying no over and over again and stood their ground. Why did they try it again this time? Was it an election
Remember,
issue?
this all goes back to the fact that after Obama did his immigration executive orders, House Republicans wanted to shut down the entire government in December. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So, in order to prevent them from shutting down the whole government,
A whole Christmas present.
Boehner said, we will just only fund Homeland Security until February, then you guys will get to have your showdown with the president.
So it's an appeasement issue.
So, Boehner dug this hole himself for the entire party. Knowing full well, because on all honesty, Senate Republicans, even the crazy ones like Ted Cruz, have been saying for 2 months that this was not going to work. The government shutdown king himself proclaimed that this was not a good idea. It was not going to work.
Wait a minute. Let's not credit him with sanity. The only reason he's saying that is because he's not leading the charge and he doesn't stand to make personal bank from it.
Well, yeah, it's not Obamacare. If this was shutting down the government over Obamacare, Cruz would be all over that.
Where he was the one leading the charge and making all the money.
But no, I mean, even whenever Senate Republicans have been privately and sometimes publicly warning their House colleagues that this was not going to work. Don't do this.
Well, everyone knew this wasn't going to work. And really, even when you and I were discussing it before this week, we thought, they're going to pull it together. Boehner will face reality. He'll cave. And now it really looks like it's going to be down to the last minute. It's just more drama.
Yeah, it is drama. It's the Republican drama queens creating drama just to do something.
This is how they avoid legislating,
Yeah.
and really that is their goal. So we all make fun of them, but in another reality, they're achieving part of their goal, which is to constantly
break government.
Yes, exactly. Bring government down to its knees.
They have a negative conceptualization of power, which means they want to limit the government from functioning.
Only when they're not in power, though. They claim that as an ideology, and yet you notice when they're in power, they lean towards fascism, if anything, or they're grabbing more and more power.
If you remember, George W. Bush put their theory into practice by putting incompetent people as agency heads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that went really well.
And we saw how that turned out.
Yeah.
So.
So more of that would be fun. Let's hope the American voters are smarter than that.
Oh, I think we all know pretty much what may very well happen in 2016. It's not going to
Well,
be...
we have our fingers crossed.
It's not going to be good for the Republicans because what candidate, who out there whose initials aren't JC, could actually... And, Jesus could walk on water, but who actually could run with this Republican Party?
Jesus would not run as a Republican. I mean, I'm
confident. I mean, it would take somebody of Jesus level powers to make this party seem functional.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for joining me this evening to talk about this huge Republican meltdown. I mean, it's actually really fascinating to watch and pretty crazy, but it's got some Romney on it because I find myself having those moments of where this feels surreal and it's sort of like this is an onion story, this isn't real, and yet it is. So I'm always glad that you're here to keep us on the level and keep us in touch with reality. So thank you. Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you next time.